You made the decision carefully, not impulsively. You actually thought it through. You weighed the options, checked the logic, explained it to yourself in a way that made sense. Maybe it was a job, a person you decided to trust, money you moved because the numbers told you to. It felt solid, reasonable, right? And then slowly, it wasn't. The decisions started falling apart. And when you went back to understand what went wrong, you found something that's hard to sit with. The reasoning you used looked exactly like every time you were right. Same confidence, same logic, same feeling of clarity, just a completely different outcome. Here's what nobody tells you about that. The brain doesn't distinguish between thinking carefully and thinking convincingly. It just produces a feeling of certainty and hands it to you as if it's the truth. And the smarter you are, the better you are at building arguments for conclusions you'd already reached before you started thinking. Why rational decisions go wrong. The strange thing about bad decisions is that they rarely feel irrational at the time. People don't lose money, trust the wrong person, or misjudge a situation because they weren't thinking carefully. They do it while thinking very carefully, and the outcome still goes wrong. If intelligence and effort are present, why do these mistakes keep repeating? Why do smart people misjudge risk? Why do decisions that once felt perfectly logical sometimes collapse under the weight of reality? The answer isn't intelligence. It isn't discipline. It isn't even better information. It's something that runs underneath all of those things. Something in the structure of how the mind processes the world. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this keeps happening, even when you know better, and more importantly, why knowing better is often not enough. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying exactly this problem, how people actually make decisions in situations involving uncertainty, risk, and incomplete information. His findings eventually came together in the book Thinking, Fast, and Slow. But here's what most people misunderstand about his central argument. They assume it's about becoming more rational, correcting biases, upgrading your thinking. It's not. What he actually found is more unsettling. The errors are not mistakes you make. They are features of how you think, built into the architecture of the mind itself. And it starts with understanding that two very different systems are running your decisions. The first is the fast mind. It operates automatically, without effort. It recognizes patterns, reads faces, generates impressions, and produces answers, instantly, confidently, before you've even decided to think. You don't choose to use it. It simply reacts. The second is the slow mind. It's deliberate, analytical. It engages when something requires real effort, a difficult calculation, a complex decision, a moment of genuine doubt. In theory, it's supposed to monitor the fast mind, check its answers, catch errors before they become decisions. But here's what actually happens. Most of the time, the slow mind is asleep. The fast mind produces a quick, coherent answer. And the slow mind, instead of checking it, simply approves it because the answer felt right, because questioning it would require effort, and the brain will always prefer ease over accuracy. This is not a flaw in unintelligent people. This is the default state of every human mind. Autopilot doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for permission. It just acts. And the pilot, usually, never notices. Idea 1, the lazy controller. Quick exercise before we go further. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Take a second. What number came to mind? Most people say 10 cents. It arrives instantly, feels obvious, feels done. It's wrong. If the ball costs 10 cents, the bat costs $1.10, making the total $1.20. Not $1.10. The correct answer is 5 cents. Now, the math isn't hard. You could verify it in seconds. But most people don't, because an answer arrived before they thought to check it. And once an answer arrives and feels right, the mind stops looking. That's the whole problem right there. The fast mind generated a response. The slow mind, the one capable of checking, simply approved it. Not because it evaluated the answer, Because the answer felt complete. And checking something that feels complete requires effort the brain would rather not spend. Now take that same dynamic out of a puzzle and put it into your real life. You meet someone for the first time. Within 2 minutes, you've formed a clear impression. Trustworthy or not, competent or not, someone you'd work with or someone you wouldn't. That impression feels like a judgment. It was mostly a reflex. Or think about a time you made a financial decision, moved money, made an investment, committed to something, because the logic felt airtight. You'd thought it through. You were confident. But were you checking, or were you building a case for an answer the fast mind had already decided? That's the difference most people never notice. Thinking feels like deliberate analysis. But most of the time, it's the slow mind endorsing what the fast mind already concluded, without either of them announcing it. You weren't being careless in those moments. You were doing exactly what the mind is built to do. The problem is that being built for speed and being built for accuracy are two very different things, and the mind was never designed to tell you which one it's using. Idea 2. Here's something uncomfortable to consider. Every judgment you've ever made about a person, every assessment of a situation, every decision that felt well considered, was built from a fraction of the available information. Not most of it, a fraction. And the mind didn't flag what was missing. It built the most coherent story it could from what was present, and then treated that story as the complete picture. The name for this is simple. What you see is all there is. The mind doesn't gather information, check for gaps, and then form a conclusion. It forms a conclusion from whatever is immediately visible. And the coherence of that conclusion makes searching for gaps feel unnecessary. The picture feels whole. So why keep looking? Here's how this plays out in something most people have experienced. You're in a job interview. Either side of the table. 30 minutes. The person is articulate, confident, answers everything smoothly. The conversation flows easily. You leave certain. This is the right person. But what did you actually see? 30 minutes of someone's most prepared, most polished performance under minimal pressure. You didn't see how they handle failure, how they behave when a project falls apart, what the people who've worked alongside them for years would tell you if you asked. None of that was in the room. But because what was in the room fit together so cleanly, the picture felt complete. And a picture that feels complete doesn't invite more questions. This same pattern appears in far more serious situations. A doctor sees a patient, recognizes a familiar pattern, forms a confident diagnosis, and doesn't fully register the one detail that doesn't quite fit. Not because he's careless, but because the story is already coherent. And when a story feels coherent, details that contradict it don't raise alarms. They get quietly absorbed. The investor who ignores the warning sign because the thesis is sound. The manager who misses the problem because the team's performance looks strong on paper. In every case, the information that was missing didn't feel missing. It simply didn't exist. That's what makes this so difficult to defend against. You can't question information you don't know you're missing, which means the picture the mind builds, however partial, will always feel like the whole truth, until it isn't. Idea 3. Anchoring. Here's a quick experiment. Before you hear the next sentence, what do you think the population of Turkey is? Hold that number in your head. Now, what if before asking that question, I had said, is the population of Turkey more or less than 5 million? Your estimate would have been lower. And if I had said, is it more or less than 200 million? Your estimate would have been higher. The question itself would have moved your answer. Even though it contained no useful information, even though you knew the number I gave you was arbitrary, that's anchoring. The first number you encounter in any situation doesn't just provide context, it becomes the invisible reference point that shapes every judgment that follows. And the dangerous part, you don't feel it happening. It doesn't feel like influence. It feels like thinking. Here's where this gets real. A study asked people to spin a wheel. rigged to land on either 10 or 65, before estimating what percentage of African nations were in the United Nations. People who spun 10 estimated 25%. People who spun 65 estimated 45%. A random spinning wheel, with no connection to the question, shifted answers by 20 percentage points. The anchor didn't need to be relevant, it just needed to arrive first. Think about the last time you negotiated something: a salary, a price, a deal. Whoever put the first number on the table didn't just open the conversation. They set the boundaries of the entire negotiation, without either side fully realizing it. The person who earns more in a salary negotiation is rarely the most qualified. It's usually the one who anchored higher at the start. The retailer who marks something at $400 and then discounts it to $250 isn't giving you a deal. They're giving you an anchor and letting you feel the satisfaction of beating it. Anchors work on everyone: experts, judges, investors, doctors. In one study, experienced legal professionals given higher anchor numbers in sentencing recommendations consistently gave longer sentences, even when they knew the anchor was randomly generated. Knowing about anchoring doesn't make you immune. It just makes you slightly more likely to pause before the first number someone gives you quietly becomes the only number that matters. Idea 4. The illusion of validity. There's a feeling most people trust completely. The feeling of knowing, not guessing, not estimating, actually knowing, with quiet, settled certainty, that your judgment is right. Here's the uncomfortable truth about that feeling. It has almost no relationship with whether you're actually correct. Confidence is not generated by accuracy. It's generated by coherence. When the pieces of a story fit together cleanly, when the explanation feels smooth, the logic feels tight, the narrative feels complete, the mind produces a feeling of certainty. That feeling is real. The certainty it implies is not. In one study, military psychologists spent years evaluating young soldiers, watching them perform exercises, assessing their leadership qualities, predicting who would succeed as officers. They felt confident in their assessments. The observations were detailed. The judgments felt grounded. When they followed up, their predictions had almost no correlation with actual performance. But the feeling of knowing had been completely intact the entire time. This is what gets called the illusion of validity. The mind builds a coherent story from available observations. That coherence produces confidence, and that confidence feels indistinguishable from being right. Think about the last time you were completely certain about a person, how they'd perform, whether they could be trusted, what they were really like. That certainty didn't come from a complete picture. It came from a picture that felt complete. The story fit together. The details aligned. System 2 found nothing obviously wrong with it. So the confidence arrived. Full, settled, convincing. And here's the part that makes this particularly difficult. Experience makes it worse. The more you've seen, the faster coherent stories form. The faster they form, the more certain they feel. The more certain they feel, the less reason there seems to be to question them. As one line in the research puts it, subjective confidence in a judgment is not a reasoned evaluation of the probability that the judgment is correct. It's a feeling generated by the quality of the story, not the quality of the evidence. A compelling story and a correct answer feel identical from the inside, and the mind never tells you which one you're holding. Idea 5, loss aversion. Think about these two scenarios. Scenario 1, someone hands you $100, clean, unexpected, yours to keep. Scenario 2, you reach into your pocket and realize you've lost $100 you didn't know you had. Same amount of money, opposite directions. Which one hits harder? For almost everyone, the loss, and not by a small margin. Research consistently shows that losing something feels roughly twice as powerful as gaining the equivalent. The pain of losing $100 is psychologically stronger than the pleasure of finding $100. That asymmetry has a name: loss aversion, and it quietly shapes far more of your decisions than you realize. Here's where it moves from interesting to expensive. Think about an investor who buys a stock. It drops 30%. The logical question at that point is simple. Given everything you know now, is this still worth holding? But that's not the question most people ask. The question most people ask is, if I sell now, I have to accept that I was wrong. So they hold and rationalize and wait for it to recover. Not because the evidence supports holding, but because selling makes the loss real. And the mind will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid making a loss real. This is the investor who turns a bad trade into a catastrophic one, not through ignorance, but through the psychological impossibility of accepting a smaller loss early. The same pattern appears everywhere once you see it. The job you stayed in 2 years too long, not because it was right, but because leaving meant admitting the time already spent was a mistake. The relationship held together past its natural end, because ending it meant accepting the loss of what it once was. The project funded beyond any reasonable return, because stopping felt like losing, and the mind would rather keep spending than feel that. As the research frames it, losses loom larger than gains. It's not a personality flaw. It's not weakness or irrationality. It's a structural feature of how the mind evaluates outcomes. The problem isn't that you feel losses more sharply. The problem is that the feeling arrives disguised as logic, and by the time you recognize it, the cost has already compounded. Idea 6. Framing effects. Same information, different words, completely different decision. That's not a persuasion trick. That's how the mind actually works. In one of the most cited studies on judgment and decision-making, people were presented with a medical scenario. A disease is expected to kill 600 people. 2 treatment programs are available. Group 1 was told, Program A saves 200 lives. Program B has a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 and a 2/3 chance of saving no one. Most people chose Program A. The certain outcome felt safer. Group 2 was given the exact same programs, described differently. Program A results in 400 deaths. Program B has a 1/3 chance that nobody dies and a 2/3 chance that all 600 die. Most people chose Program B. Same programs, same mathematics, same reality. The only thing that changed was whether the outcome was framed as lives saved or lives lost, and it completely reversed the decision. This is the framing effect. The mind doesn't evaluate information in isolation. It evaluates information relative to how it's presented. And the way something is presented, gain or loss, safe or risky, yours or theirs, determines the emotional weight the mind assigns to it before any analysis begins. By the time you're reasoning about the choice, the frame has already done its work. Think about how this operates in everyday life. A doctor tells you a procedure has a 90% survival rate. You feel reassured. You agree. The same doctor tells a different patient the same procedure carries a 10% mortality rate. They hesitate. They ask more questions. They want time to think. Same procedure, same odds. The frame was the only difference. Or think about negotiations, pricing, performance reviews. The person who controls how information is presented doesn't just communicate a position. They construct the psychological space in which your decision gets made. And most of the time, you never notice the construction. You just experience what feels like a clear, rational judgment. You're not evaluating facts. You're evaluating the packaging the facts arrived in. And the packaging, almost always, was chosen by someone else. Idea 7, the outside view. Here's a pattern that appears in almost every ambitious plan ever made. The project takes longer than expected, costs more than budgeted, delivers less than promised. Not because the people involved were incompetent, not because they didn't plan carefully, because they planned from the inside. When you're planning something, a business, a project, a career move, your mind naturally focuses on the specific details of your situation. Your idea, your team, your timeline, your reasons for believing this will work. This is called the inside view, and it feels like the most relevant way to think because these are the actual details. Your situation is specific, your circumstances are unique. But there's a different question almost nobody asks. What usually happens to people who attempt something like this? Not you specifically, not your unique circumstances, just Historically, statistically, what is the base rate of success for this type of endeavor? That's the outside view, and it is almost always more accurate. There's a story that illustrates this precisely. A group of experienced educators spent time developing a new curriculum. When asked how long it would take to complete, the team estimated about 2 years. Then someone asked one of the team members, an expert in curriculum development, how long similar projects typically took when he'd observed them from the outside. He paused. 7 to 10 years. And a few never finished at all. The team had all the inside information. The expert had the outside view. The project took 8 years. Think about the last time you started something with complete confidence in your timeline. A business plan that would be profitable within a year. A project that would take 3 months. A habit that would be automatic within weeks. You weren't lying to yourself. You were planning from the inside, where your specific intentions, your specific effort, your specific circumstances felt like enough information to predict the outcome. But intention is not data. Before committing to any plan, ask one question first. Not how will this go, but how do things like this usually go? The outside view won't feel as exciting as your inside story, but it will be closer to the truth. Idea 8, the two selves. Here is something quietly strange about the way the mind experiences life. There are actually 2 versions of you moving through every experience. One lives in the present moment. It feels everything in real time. The discomfort, the pleasure, the boredom, the joy, as it actually happens. This is the experiencing self. The other one doesn't live in the present. It lives in memory. It looks back, constructs a story, and decides what the experience meant. This is the remembering self. And here's the problem. When you make decisions about your life, what to pursue, what to avoid, what was worth it and what wasn't, you don't consult the experiencing self. You consult the remembering self. You make decisions based on memory, not on what you actually felt. There's a study that reveals how differently these two selves operate. Patients underwent a painful medical procedure. One group experienced a shorter procedure that ended at peak pain. Another group experienced a longer procedure, the same peak pain, but followed by a few minutes of milder discomfort before it ended. Objectively, the second group experienced more total pain, longer duration, more discomfort overall. But when asked afterward which procedure they'd prefer to repeat, the second group consistently said theirs was more tolerable because it ended on a gentler note. The remembering self doesn't calculate total pain. It remembers the peak and how things ended. Duration barely registers. Think about what this means for how you evaluate your own life. A vacation where everything went smoothly but ended with a frustrating journey home, remembered as disappointing. A difficult project that ended with real success, remembered as worthwhile, even if most of the experience was painful. A relationship that was genuinely good for years, remembered primarily through how it ended. The experiencing self lives your life. The remembering self judges it. And the one making your decisions about what to pursue, what to repeat, what was worth the cost, is the one who wasn't even fully present. As the research puts it, we don't choose between experiences. We choose between memories of experiences. And the memory is never the whole story. It's just the part the mind decided to keep. Let's take a step back. Everything we've covered, the lazy controller, the incomplete picture, the anchor, the illusion of certainty, the loss you couldn't accept, the frame someone else constructed, the plan that ignored history, the memory that replaced experience. These aren't separate problems. They're the same problem, showing up in different areas of your life. It starts with how the mind thinks. 2 systems, one fast, one slow. The fast mind runs automatically, forming impressions, generating answers, building stories before the slow mind has even engaged. The slow mind, meant to check all of this, defaults to the path of least resistance. It endorses whatever the fast mind produces because checking is expensive and the answer already feels right. This is the foundation. Everything else is a consequence of it. From that foundation, a second layer emerges, When the fast mind needs to make quick judgments about probability, about people, about risk, it reaches for shortcuts. It estimates likelihood based on what's easiest to recall. It judges probability based on how closely something resembles a familiar pattern. It locks on to the first number it encounters and builds everything else around it. These aren't random errors. They follow predictable patterns. The same mistakes appearing across different people, different cultures, different levels of intelligence and expertise. The fast mind isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was built to do, in a world far more complex than the one it was built for. Then comes the layer that makes all of this genuinely difficult to escape. The slow mind doesn't just fail to catch these errors. It builds explanations that make the errors feel like insights. After a decision goes wrong, the outcome feels like it was obvious all along. After a prediction fails, the mind quietly rewrites the story to make the failure feel inevitable. Confidence feels earned even when it wasn't. Certainty feels justified even when the evidence was thin. The more coherent your model of the world, the more experience you have, the more expertise you've built, the more convincingly wrong you can be. Because experience doesn't just build knowledge, it builds the speed and fluency with which coherent stories form. And fluency feels like truth. All of this flows into the decisions that actually cost people. Losses feel twice as powerful as equivalent gains. So people hold positions too long, avoid necessary risks, and let the fear of being wrong override the logic of moving forward. The way a choice is framed changes the decision. Not because the facts changed, but because the emotional weight assigned to them shifted before any reasoning began. Plans get built from the inside, personal, specific, optimistic, while the historical record of similar attempts goes unconsulted. And at the deepest level, the life being built, the sacrifices being made, the risks being taken, all of it gets evaluated not by how it was actually lived, but by how it will be remembered. The peak, the ending, the story the mind constructs afterward, not the experience itself. And here's the single thread connecting all of it. The mind does not pursue truth. It pursues coherence. At every level, from a quick first impression to a lifetime of choices, the brain is asking one question. Does this hold together? Not, is this accurate? Not, what am I missing? Not, what would the evidence say if I kept looking? Just, does this feel complete? And the moment it does, the search stops. Confidence arrives. The story closes. Everything the mind didn't think to look for disappears into the gap between what felt true and what actually was. This is not unique to people who aren't paying attention. This is the default architecture of every human mind. The fast mind will keep generating coherent stories. The slow mind will keep endorsing them. The anchors will keep landing before you notice them. The frames will keep arriving pre-constructed. That will not stop. But something is now available that wasn't before. You can begin to treat the feeling of certainty, not as a signal to proceed, but as a reason to pause. That pause is small, but in the moments that actually matter, the ones involving money, trust, risk, and the direction of your life, that pause is where better decisions live. Listening is good, but action is better. So as we wrap up, here are the 3 most actionable ideas. 1. The second answer rule. Every time a decision feels instantly obvious, stop. Spend 60 seconds trying to prove yourself wrong. Not to change your mind, just to confirm the slow mind was actually involved, and not just rubber stamping what the fast mind already decided. 2. The outside view question. Before committing to any plan, ask one question before anything else. What usually happens to people who try something like this? Not what you think will happen. What history actually shows. One question, 60 seconds. It will save you from more mistakes than any amount of careful planning from the inside. 3. The exit question. Once a week, look at what you're holding on to and ask, would I choose this today, knowing what I know now? If the answer is no, you're not holding on because it makes sense. You're holding on because leaving makes the loss real. You don't need all 3 every day, just the right one at the right moment. And if you've been paying attention today, you'll know exactly which moment that is. The mind doesn't fail because you weren't trying hard enough. It fails in predictable ways because it was built for speed, not accuracy. For coherence, not truth. You can't change the architecture, but you can learn to catch the moment before certainty locks in. That pause is where better decisions live. Which idea resonated most with you? Drop it in the comments below. You might be surprised how many people are holding the exact same thing. If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, subscribe. New video every week. No motivation, no fluff, just clarity. And if you want to take this further, click the left to see how these same patterns play out when other people use them on you, in influence, persuasion, and power dynamics. Click the right to see how they quietly shape every financial decision you'll ever make. Same mind, higher stakes. Choose your next step. I'll see you there.